Hello, and welcome to Everything Fear. Today, we're going to be looking at my personal top 10 horror movies of the year 2020. Hello, and welcome to Everything Fear, your one-stop shop for all things horror. I'm Kit Tinsley. I'm a horror author, film academic, and general horror geek. As I say, today we're going to be looking at my personal top 10 horror movies of the year 2020. And what a year it's been, eh? Also, at the end of this video, I will be announcing the winner of my 100 subscriber giveaway. At number 10, Body Cam. A supernatural crime thriller with some creepy moments and a great central performance from Mary J. Blige. Perhaps a little predictable as a horror movie, it never strays too far away from the formula, and all of its twists and turns are signposted so heavily that they come as little surprise. However, where the film does excel is as a snapshot of the cultural zeitgeist of its time. It deals with very heavy issues like institutional racism and police corruption in a very even-handed way. If you're interested, I did a full review of this movie and you can find that video up here. Number 9, Nobody Sleeps in the Woods Tonight. This is another film that I've already reviewed this year, and that review is up here. This was my first Polish horror movie, I think, and it was a really enjoyable experience. The movie is heavily influenced by American slasher and redneck horror films. Nobody Sleeps in the Woods Tonight offers interesting characters who at first appear to be the typical stereotypes of the slasher genre, but as the film progresses you find out that each of them has a lot more depth to them. That's really well done. A pair of mutant hillbilly twins stalk these tech-addicted teens through the Polish woods. With great special effects and its tongue very firmly in its cheek, this is a really enjoyable movie. 8. Ghosts of War. I think I've said before that I'm a sucker for movies that mix horror with war movies. I don't know what it is, but there's just something about that subgenre that I find really, really entertaining. So when I heard about this movie, of course I was going to watch it. A group of American soldiers are sent to relieve another group of soldiers who are guarding a chateau deep in the French countryside. The chateau was formerly a Nazi base, and the worry is that the Nazis will try to recapture it. It soon becomes clear that the soldiers are not alone in the house and that something is trying to contact them. For the first 30-40 minutes of this movie, I suspected that it was going to be a fairly bog-standard haunting movie, just using the Second World War as a backdrop to make it more interesting. However, it slowly becomes clear that something much more interesting is going on here. Strange coincidences and historical inaccuracies soon begin to mount up to the point where you think these aren't mistakes and that there is something very strange happening within this film. And these things are very important to the surprise ending we get. Now, from what I've seen online, a lot of people didn't like the ending. Personally, I thought the actual idea was great. It could have perhaps been executed a little better, but I thought it was a really good idea, the ending of this movie. And I think that that ending made this film much more interesting than it would have been just being a bog-standard haunting movie. Number 7, The Hunt. Another divisive movie from this year. A satire that points out the ridiculousness on the extremes of both sides of the political spectrum. This movie was always going to ruffle feathers on both sides. The movie itself, though, is just such amazingly good fun. So over the top. Some really famous faces are obliterated within the first few minutes of this movie, completely unexpectedly. Every time you think that we found our protagonist, someone we start following, they're killed off in an ever more over-the-top kind of way. Eventually we do find our heroine in the form of Betty Gilpin's Crystal. And what a heroine she is. An ex-military badass who takes on her hunters in a methodical and brutal way. The irony being that Crystal isn't even meant to be there, she's a mistake. And I think she represents the general public, the people who are not on the extremes of either side of the spectrum, who just want to get on. Number 6, His House. A strange and wonderfully creepy movie, this. It deals with a couple of asylum seekers being moved into a flat in inner city London. They try to make this grim flat as homely as possible, but it soon becomes clear that something evil resides within the walls of this flat. This movie has some wonderfully tense and creepy scenes, as well as some nightmarish scenes that almost verge on surreal. Nightmarish images and landscapes that are reminiscent of a Hieronymus Bosch painting crossed with a Lucio Fulci movie and an Ingmar Bergman film. Ultimately, though, the film and its demons are a study in survivor guilt, when people have to deal with the things that they have done just in order to survive. 5. The Mortuary Collection. This Shudder exclusive came out in time for Halloween, a portmanteau film in the style of Creepshow and Tales from the Crypt. The always amazing Clancy Brown seems to be having enormous fun under the makeup playing the mortician, an enigmatic figure who collects the stories of people's deaths. The stories here are the typical cautionary tales of the genre, people being punished for their transgressions. The plots of the stories are simple, but they're well acted, well written, and have some genuine scares and are really good fun. This is a movie that knows it's not going to be taken too seriously, but it delivers a great, funny, often quite disgusting horror movie. Number 4, Underwater. Another one from 2020 that seems to be love it or hate it. It seems that 2020 was a really divisive and polarising year for some reason. I wonder why. I fall into the category of thinking that Underwater was one of the best horror movies of the year. Its plot is neither complicated or overly original. However, it's delivered in such an intense and well-crafted way. The movie jumps into its action within the opening couple of minutes, and the tension never lets up. It's about the crew of a deep-sea mining station who are trying to escape their crumbling station and make it across the ocean floor to the safety of another station. Of course, there's something out there though. Something their drilling has awoken. Something ancient and distinctly Lovecraftian. Number 3, Relic. This movie hit me really hard. My dad is in the late stages of dementia, so this film really was a sucker punch for me, personally. A mother and daughter with a tense relationship go back to their family home together because the grandmother has gone missing. When the old woman turns up, it's clear that she's changed, and they begin to suspect that she is suffering from dementia. So they stay to look after her. The house and the grandmother soon become terrifying and unrecognisable. The house becomes a labyrinth of crumbling and forgotten room, and the grandmother becomes a hideous monster. The idea of this labyrinth of forgotten rooms and of familiar things becoming unrecognisable and sinister as a metaphor for dementia was really, really good, and it almost brought me to tears. Number 2, The Invisible Man. Lee Whannell's 2020 version of The Invisible Man is a masterpiece of tension, shot in a way that constantly makes you wonder whether the Invisible Man is actually there. The film works as a metaphor for abusive relationships and gaslighting, and how these things are so hard to escape from, even long after you've actually left the situation. An amazing central performance from Elizabeth Moss really grounds the fantastical elements of this film into something believable. You genuinely worry about her sanity and if she will ever recover from this. With this performance and Whannell's incredibly restrained and technical direction, you end up with a remake that really, really works. It was really hard not to put this movie at number 1 spot. But then an unexpected movie blew me away this year. Number 1, Host. A movie that lasts a little over an hour, filmed entirely in a Zoom meeting with completely unknown actors. By rights, this film should not have been as brilliant as it was. A group of friends in lockdown do an online seance which basically summons up some evil entity that terrorises them. Even the plot of this movie doesn't make it sound as good as it is. The film is reminiscent of Paranormal Activity. However, this film does actually show you something. There is some sort of payoff, which is what I always thought was lacking with the whole Paranormal Activity franchise. However, what really makes this film so great are the performances of the entire cast. Their initial casualness is so believable as just friends chatting that it could almost be considered bad acting. It's just so real. Until the horror starts, at which point their acting is so real, their fear and terror is so believable, but you can't help but end up feeling the same way. The film is just so intense, and its short runtime allows for absolutely no filler. Every second in this movie counts, and definitely my absolute favourite horror movie of 2020. Well, that concludes my list of my top 10 favourite horror movies of 2020. What were yours? Let me know in the comments. I know that there are a few that I've heard a lot of good things about that I haven't actually got round to seeing myself yet, that I will definitely probably have to add into this list. Things like Possessor, Anything for Jackson, Hunter x Hunter. I've heard good things about all of these movies, so I am looking forward to seeing those. However, it's now time for me to announce the winner of my giveaway. The competition was to win copies, signed copies, of my 3 horror novels, Beneath, The Wilds, and The Smoke in the Photograph. The winner of the competition is Joseph Keel. Give yourself a big round of applause, Joseph. Those books will be on their way to you very shortly. Well, thank you very much for joining me, and until next time, stay scared.